Hello everybody out there in the bookverse, it's Stephanie, and today I'm going to be bringing you a video that kind of goes along with a couple of videos that I posted before. So I posted one that was my best fit books of the decade and then my worst books of the decade, and this time I'm going to be talking about reading like a decade's worth of books in a month. And I have some good books to talk about in this video. So I decided to pick one book from each year that I was extremely excited about and excited to read, and then I was going to read those 10 books, which I did. I found that some of the books I was extremely excited for were great and awesome and everything that I expected, and some of them really not so much, and I don't even know why I wanted to read them in the first place looking back on it. But anyways, without further ado, let's jump into the books, and I'm going to start with 2010. And I've also decided that I am going to rank the books from in my order of favorite to least favorite. I'm going to tell them to you in the order of publication, but I'm going to rank them for you as well, so you can see which year produced the best book, according to me. So the book published in 2010 that I was the most excited to read was The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. This is the first book in his Stormlight archive. There are 3 books out in that series so far, and the 4th one is coming out later this year. This book is thick. It is 1,000 pages long, and it is amazing. This is an epic high fantasy book, and I don't even hardly know how to describe what this book is about concisely enough, but this world is amazing and so well developed. The magic system in it is fascinating. It kind of has to do with using magic from stones, but also from storms, and then some people can use magic from this kind of place. I don't even know how to describe this to you guys, but I love it. There is a war going on because a king was assassinated, and now they're trying to avenge him, and they are trying to fight this war with these creatures that they don't know very much about, but they come to know more as they fight them, and I just could not get enough of this book. It was so much fun to read. I absolutely loved it. The characters in here just drew me in, and I love them. Kaladin is one of my new favorites. I absolutely love Dalinar as well. He was also one of my favorites in this. I just think that the character development was extremely well done. It was amazing. I felt for all these characters. I was invested in them. I wanted them all to succeed, and I was just so drawn into this world. And I obviously gave this book a 5 out of 5 stars, and it is one of my new favorites of all time. It is amazing, and I cannot wait to jump into the second book in this series, Words of Radiance, and I am just so excited because I love this. I love it, guys. I love it. I love it. The next book on this list I actually ended up getting from my library, and that is 11/22/63 by Stephen King. This is a book about a man who figures out a way to time travel, and he decides he's going to use that ability to go back in time and to stop the assassination of JFK. This book is also extremely thick. And I think that was my main issue with it, was that I didn't feel like it needed to be that long. I felt like this story went on and on and on about everyday life and everyday things. And I think it was to help us to learn about the characters more and develop more stronger bonds with those characters. But I just found it to be a little much. It was, I don't even remember how long it was, like maybe 800 pages or something. I don't even remember. I'll put the number up here somewhere. But it was just excessive. I felt like there were things in there that didn't need to be there. There was stuff there that was just kind of excess information, and it just wasn't important to the plot. It wasn't something that I needed to know. But that being said, I did really, really enjoy this book. I thought it was extremely well written, except for, the excessively long part. And I thought it was very fascinating. I was drawn into the story, and I really, really wanted to know what happened. I wasn't quite as invested in the characters as I would expect to be in a book that long, because you do get to know them really well. And I did like them, I did enjoy them, but I felt more invested in the plot and the story than I was in the characters in this book. I absolutely loved it. I had to know what happened, and I feel like it had an amazing ending. I love the way this book ended. I feel like some authors are hesitant to end a book's certain ways, but I loved it. I thought it was extremely well done, and I had so much fun reading this book. I would highly recommend it if you like kind of time and travel sci-fi books and also historical fiction, because there is a lot of history in this book and there's a lot about that time period. And we do learn, I feel like we learn a lot more about Lee Harvey Oswald than we do about JFK, but that was really fascinating as well because I knew absolutely nothing about this guy. So yes, I really enjoyed 11/22/63, and I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars, so it was still really, really good, but it was not as good as Way of Kings. So Way of Kings is still at number 1, and 11/22/63 is going to come in at number 2 for the moment. The book published in 2012 that I chose to read was Gone Girl. And the reason I decided to go with this one is because it seems like such a classic thriller. Not classic in the sense that it's old, but classic in the sense that it kind of did things to bring on this new thriller kind of era. I don't know. It just feels like one that people talk about a lot when they talk about thrillers and where thrillers are at today. This book follows a man whose wife has been killed or is missing, and the police think that he is the one who did it. And so we are seeing things from his perspective post her going missing, and also we are reading journal entries from her pre her going missing. And I didn't really like this book. It was interesting, but I feel like I guessed what was going to happen in it, and it made it not so fun for me because the twist was the biggest thing about this book. I wasn't super invested in what happened, honestly, though, because I didn't really like any of the characters. I didn't really care. I liked some side characters, okay, but I didn't really love our 2 main characters, and I was not really enjoying the book all that much throughout reading it. And it was really long as well. Why am I picking such long books for this? But it was pretty long for a contemporary, which I don't really enjoy my contemporaries being long. I feel like that just drags it out and I get bored, which I did. I did get bored, and I think it dragged it out a little too much for my liking. I gave it a 2 out of 5 stars, which is actually a pretty bad rating. I guess it wasn't a good book. I was trying to be nice. You know what? Now I know. Now I know why this is considered kind of a classic, because it brings in a trope that is now very popular in books and in thrillers. And so yeah, I didn't love it. Sorry guys. This one definitely is at the bottom of my tier ranking for the moment. The 2013 book that I read was The Rosie Project by Graham Simsian, and I was extremely excited for this book. I don't know why this book struck me as an adult romance that I would absolutely love. I think probably because it reminded me a little bit of The Big Bang Theory with Sheldon. And so the way this story is set up is there is a man who is a professor. He's a very intellectual, and he has a little bit of Asperger's. And he decides that he is going to set up a project to find himself a wife. And then one of the people that he ends up dating while trying to work on this project is named Rosie. And she is kind of way out from what he would expect for someone that he would marry to be. But he decides to try it because she apparently came up on his list of people who would be a match for him. And the shenanigans that ensue from that. It was okay. I liked it fine, but I didn't love it. I wasn't as in love with him as a character as I thought I was going to be, because I tend to really love characters like that. The really, really smart ones that aren't as good socially, but then they fall in love. And I had fun reading it, but it wasn't anything that I absolutely loved and anything that I'm ever going to read again. This was definitely a 3-star read for me. It was average. It was still good. I would recommend it to someone if you like adult romance, but it wasn't anything that I am going to really be remembering for a long time or thinking about. So this one is going to go on my list below 11/22/63, but definitely above Gone Girl. The next book that I read for this, I actually listened to the audiobook for, and that is The Miniaturist. I do not remember who the author is, so I'll put up a picture of the book for you guys to see, but I did not like this book. This book was pretty bad. I gave this book a 2 out of 5 stars. I just didn't really know what the plot was of this book. I didn't know what the point was. I didn't know what we were going for in it. Most of the time I was just like, what is supposed to be happening? What is going to happen? Is there an end all to this book? Is there something we want to occur? Are we rooting for any of our characters in particular? I didn't really like any of our characters in particular. There were some I disliked, but there are none that I really loved and was drawn towards and really was rooting for. And I think that really hurt this book because it seemed like a very character-focused book. It was kind of a book about a girl who marries this rich guy, and then he buys her a doll house, and this person who makes miniature figurines and stuff starts sending her things that go along with her house that seem to be predicting the future. The way it's described with like the miniaturist and the dollhouse and stuff didn't really end up being all that important to the plot. Like, it was important, but it wasn't the point of it. I don't even know. Like, that's how much I dislike this book, is I don't even really know what we were supposed to be reading about in this, what we were supposed to be caring about, how to even summarize this book. So definitely a 2 out of 5 stars for me, and this is the lowest on my tier ranking so far. Okay, 2015, we're gonna go back up with the book that I liked, and that was An Ember in the Ashes by Sabaa Tahir. This book is the first in a quartet. I believe it's going to be, I think we only have 3 out so far, and it is a young adult fantasy series. It follows this boy and a girl. It's dual perspective. They live in a fantasy world where there is kind of ruling class people and the lowdown people, which is very common in these fantasy books. And the girl decides that she is going to go in and be a spy in the training school where these like warriors are trained, and it also follows one of the boys who's in that warrior school. I did not mind that this was dual perspective. Sometimes that does bug me in these YA books when you jump between the male and the female in this obviously going to be love interest. But I really liked it in this one. I think I was a little more interested in the male side of it, and I enjoyed it more when we were on his side. I think his name's Elias. So they are Laia and Elias. But I really did like his perspective in it, and I thought it was a lot of fun, but I wasn't as invested in hers, and I didn't like her as much as a character, which was unfortunate because I feel like I could have really loved her, and I'm hoping that she's going to develop a little more in the next books. She's trying to save her brother's life, and so she is doing this with hopes that people will help her to save him. And that's not always a trope that I really enjoy because I feel like I'm not really attached to her brother at all, so her desire to save him doesn't mean as much to me. That's hard for me to be invested in that kind of plot. But I did enjoy the romance in this book, actually. I'm thinking I'll enjoy it more as it develops in the next books. I'm really hoping, because it just kind of barely started in this one. But I did like the writing style a lot. I thought the world development was pretty good. There's a lot to learn about this world, I think, and we just barely scratched the surface, but I'm thinking it's going to be enjoyable. I think the character development was really well done. I was very invested in Elias in particular, and his friends, and his time in his life at this academy, and I think that it'll be really good continuing. This is a solid start to a series. So I am going to be putting this above 11/22/63, but it is still below The Way of Kings. Oh, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. The book that was published in 2016 that I chose to read was The Labyrinth of Spirits by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. He is the author of The Shadow of the Wind. So The Shadow of the Wind is not really a standalone book per se. It is in a collection of stories. So these stories aren't necessarily sequels in that the first one story was completed and they kind of complete in each one, but they are companion novels. So this is the 4th and final companion novel in that collection. I loved this book. I thought it was amazing. I love Carlos Ruiz Zafón's writing style. I think it is so beautiful. It draws you in and you can just like feel the atmosphere. You get so connected to the characters in his books, and I absolutely loved it. This follows a woman who is kind of a PI, you could say, but she is a very good one, and she's really good at what she does. She's a very morally gray character, which I enjoyed how that was portrayed in this book. I think she was very well done in this, and it also follows some of the other characters that we are familiar with from previous books. I don't really want to say a lot because I don't know if that will necessarily spoil things for people, but this does tie in very, very heavily with the other books. So if you're going to read this one, you can read it on its own, but I wouldn't if you are planning to read the other books later because it will spoil some things from the other books. This takes place in Barcelona in the 1900s, in like the 1950s, I believe, and I thought it was a great setting for a book. I really like that kind of older European setting. I think it's really fascinating, but this was just so thrilling. I wanted to know what was happening. This is kind of a mystery thriller-ish, but also kind of a historical fiction-ish, so it's kind of those things all balled up in one. So if you like that kind of thing, I would highly, highly recommend this book. I absolutely loved it. The writing is so beautiful. My only real big issue with this book was the epilogue. I feel like it was unnecessary and I didn't really care. It was about 100 pages of me not really caring about it. It was an epilogue that didn't need to happen in my opinion. Still, I absolutely loved it. I'm just gonna kind of pretend like the epilogue wasn't there. And I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. It still, though, is gonna come in right below Way of Kings. Way of Kings is still holding on to the #1 spot, but this one is in the #2 spot. The 2017 release that I chose to read was YearOne by Nora Roberts. Now, I had realized that I'd never read anything by Nora Roberts, and she is just a very classic author. I think she's published more books than most people who are alive, and she is a very well-known writer, and apparently she's amazing. And I agree, I really did enjoy this book a lot. This is kind of an apocalyptic fantasy book, almost paranormal fantasy. It follows a bunch of people who are trying to survive this kind of plague that has taken over the world, and if you get it, it is 100% fatal, and if you don't get it, sometimes people develop these magical abilities. So we are following some people who have these magical abilities and some people that do not, and just watching them try to survive in this world, try to figure out what's going on a little bit, not too much. It's mostly survival at this point, but I feel like there is more going on than we are realizing. This isn't a trilogy. This is the first book in a trilogy. I just can't quite figure out if I love it or not. I don't always love paranormal fantasy and I don't always love apocalyptic books, but I really, really enjoyed this one. I enjoyed the characters a lot in here, and I liked so many of the characters. I think that's probably why I enjoyed it the most, is I was invested in a lot of their lives very heavily, and I was really rooting for a lot of them, but I just didn't understand things enough. And in my fantasy books, I like to understand what's going on. I don't like the magic to be vague that much. I like to kind of get it. I like to get the point of it. I like to get how it works and stuff. And I didn't get that in this book. And I think that's one reason that I was a little frustrated with it, because I am such a fantasy fan. And this one was just kind of teasing me with the fantasy elements that was going on in here. So I ended up giving this book a 4 out of 5 stars. I did really, really enjoy it, and I would highly recommend it. It was a lot of fun. In my ranking, I'm gonna put it below An Ember in the Ashes, but above 11/22/63. So it's sitting happy in the middle right now. Okay, the book published in 2018 that I chose to read is another one by Brandon Sanderson, and that is Skyward. I had so much fun with this book. It was a really, really enjoyable read. This is his YA fantasy book. It's the first one in his series. I don't know how many are going to be in it, but this follows a girl named Spencer who wants to be a pilot, but her father was known as a traitor, and so she can't get into pilot school. So she has the odds kind of stacked against her. No one wants her to go to pilot school, and when she gets into pilot school, people think she is a coward as well, and they look down on her, and she just feels this need to prove herself, and she wants to be a pilot no matter what. And she has a personality that is so much fun, but I feel like would be a little much to deal with if you were one of her classmates sometimes, because she is just so intense. Like, she is over the top extra all the time, and it was a ton of fun to read about. I had so much fun reading this book, but I was like,
Spencer, dude, you gotta chill a little bit.
It did make her a great fighter though. So one of the things that I absolutely loved was the AI in this book. I know a lot of people say that, but I had a lot of fun with him. He was funny. He was a comedic relief in this book. I don't have a ton to say that was negative about this book. I did enjoy pretty much everything. Like, I had a lot of fun reading it, but it wasn't that, I didn't have quite that wow factor that I was expecting. It did have some great twists. It had some great things that she learned. It had some action scenes, and I think it was paced really well. So really everything was done extremely well. but it just didn't hit me quite as hard as some of the other books that I read. And so I did end up giving this a 4 out of 5 stars. And for the ranking, as of now, it is going to go below The Labyrinth of the Spirits and right above An Ember in the Ashes. So it's sitting at number 3, not too bad, but yeah. I really, really loved it and I would highly recommend it, but it just didn't have that little something to put it over the edge. And the 2019 release, and the last one on this list, is Middle Game by Seanan McGuire. This book is about a man who was created by an alchemist and is now an alchemist himself, and creates these twins that he wants to kind of embody this power in order to control the world, pretty much, in order to become practically gods and be able to be invincible and unstoppable and receive all this knowledge and power. Sounds amazing, right? And it was. Like, this book was so good. I loved it. It was so much fun to read. I just feel like some of the alchemy in it, I didn't quite get how they made the connection from what was happening to like, oh, this is happening, so this is the magical thing that comes from it. I'm like, huh, if you say so, I guess. But I loved the characters. I loved the twins in it, Roger and Dodger. They were cute when they were kids and we got to know them and you just learned to love them. And then they were teenagers and you got frustrated with things, but you still loved them. They were adults and you were just, I loved growing up with them. I think that was one of the best things about this, to really draw you into these characters and get super invested in their lives and the outcomes of everything. I thought they were amazingly well developed, and I really liked some of the side characters that were in here as well. I think the character development in this book was extremely well done, and that was one of my very favorite things. I think the concept of it was great. I think it was fascinating and interesting, and I was really invested in how this was all going to work out and how it was going to happen. But I think sometimes the execution just didn't really hit home for me, because it was a little bit like, oh, we'll just do this and this and this and this happens. And I'm like, that doesn't make sense to me. I don't know that much about alchemy. Maybe it would make sense to someone who'd studied that, but some of the things just seemed either a little too convenient or just a little randomly would happen. I did love it though. I would highly recommend this book to people. Like, just kind of skip over the stuff that you don't really understand. Like, just keep on pushing through it. I absolutely loved it. I did give it a 4 out of 5 stars. So this book is going to rank on my list in the number 3 spot. So it is above Skyward and just below The Labyrinth of the Spirits. But this was an amazing book, so definitely go check it out. And that wraps up the decade. I read 10 books for each of the years, and I will put the ranking up so you can see which year won. I am actually very proud that the year that won was 2010. The very oldest book that I read on this list was my absolute favorite. I was disappointed in some, but overall, this was a really fun experiment for me to do, and I loved so many of these books. So let me know down in the comments what you think. If you've read any of these books, let me know which ones are your favorite and which ones you think would rank top in your list. And as always, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more, hit the subscribe button down below, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye.